Zhang He. Alongside Yu Jin, Yue Jin, Zhang Liao and Xu Huang, Zhang He was considered by Chen Xu as one of the 5 elite generals of Wei, although this was not an official title of the time. His distinguished military service record spanned for 46 years, from the Yellow Turban Rebellion to the Battle of Mount Qi. He met his downfall here because he dutifully followed orders that he knew would most likely get him killed. Zhang He was posthumously given the title of Magnificent Lord of Mao Village. As a commander, he is credited as knowing how to deal with changing circumstances. He was proficient in organizing his camp and understood the value of good terrain. It's recorded that even Zhuge Liang feared Zhang He's military capabilities. Despite being a fearless general, Zhang He also dedicated himself to scholarly pursuits. An edict that commends Zhang He describes this, where it says, "Externally, General Zhang manages the army, and internally cherishes the dynasty. I commend the general's ideal and consider him worthy of becoming a court scholar." The Zhang surname is a massively popular one. Many notable heroes, such as the advisor to Liu Bang, founder of the Han dynasty, Zhang Liang, share lineage with Zhang He. Zhang Jue, Zhang Rang, Zhang Yi's, Zhang Ni, Zhang Fei, Zhang Liao, Zhang Chunhua, Zhang Hong, Zhang Bu, and Zhang Zhao are the most notable Zhangs of the Three Kingdoms period. It's a surname that exists in many languages. For example, in English, the name Zhang corresponds with the surname Archer. Born in Mao County, Zhang's first recorded when he responded to the Han's call for assistance in dealing with the Yellow Turban Uprising. He was commissioned to be a major, then sent to Ji province to serve under its inspector, Han Fu. Years later, when the anti-Dongzhuo coalition collapsed, Yuan Shao and Han Fu sought to legitimize their coalition as the rightful imperial power. They intended to declare Liu Yu as the new emperor, but he refused, as Liu Yu did not want to offend or upset the actual emperor Liu Xian. Yuan Shao formed an alliance with Gong Xunzan and then incited him to attack Han Fu. The panicked Han Fu was then easy to manipulate by Yuan Shao's loyalists. Within Han Fu's court, they convinced him to cede power over to Yuan to ensure the safety of the region. Zhang He then became a subordinate of Yuan Shao by circumstance and was promoted to the rank of colonel. He was deployed in the battles to come against Gong Xunzan as he marched his army south on numerous expeditions. The Battle of Jixiao stopped Gong Xunzan's southern advance, but it was followed by more conflicts until Yuan Shao eventually emerged victorious. This battle is unique in how it's documented in the records of the Three Kingdoms. Although the 40,000 soldiers that made up Gong Xunzan's army are likely exaggerated, the recordings of this battle detail the formations and tactics used, things that are usually left out. Gong Xunzan positioned his infantry in a square, with his cavalry divided into 2 at each of his flanks. In the centre were his White Horse Volunteers, the elite mounted unit that made up his main fighting force. The Yuan army was of similar size, but made up almost entirely of infantry. The battle ultimately highlights the ineffectiveness of even an experienced cavalry force against a disciplined infantry unit with competent leadership. It also shows that even though the numbers of troops are high, the majority of the fighting was done by a small portion of both armies. When the outcomes of the important clashes were determined and the core soldiers fled, the masses that made up the army soon followed. After Gong Xunzan's loss here, it took anywhere from days to weeks for his army to return to his main base. When the Battle of Guandu got underway, Zhang He suggested to Yuan Shao, "My lord, although you achieved repeated successes, do not do battle with Duke Tao. Instead, quietly dispatch cavalry south of his position to cut off his lines of communication, then his forces would defeat themselves." But Yuan did not listen to his advice. After numerous failed skirmishes and the deaths of Yan Liang and Wen Chao, reports of Cao Cao's assault on Wu Chao reached Yuan Shao's camp. Zhang He spoke up to warn Yuan Shao, where he told him, "If Lord Tao's best troops have gone, he is sure to defeat Chun Yu Xiong. When Chun Yu Xiong is defeated, the affair is lost. I beg first to go and help him." But one of Yuan Shao's advisors, Guo Tu, said, "Zhang He's plan is unnecessary. If you assault Duke Tao's main camp, he must certainly abandon his attack and return to defend it. In this way, you save Xiong by attacking Tao." But Zhang He disagreed and replied, "Lord Tao's camp is strong. If we attack it, we shall certainly not succeed. If Chun Yuxiong and the others are taken, then we shall all be captives. Yuan sent his main force to attack the Tao main camp, whilst he only sent a few cavalry to assist at Wu Chao. Zhang He and Gaolan tried to overcome the enemy's defences, but as Zhang He predicted, it could not be done, and so they both surrendered over to Tao Hong. Pei Songzhi noticed a discrepancy in the recordings of Zhang He's surrender. In Yuan Shao's and Cao Cao's biography, it states that Zhang He joined Wei after Yuan Shao had surrendered. In Zhang He's and Shun Yu's biographies, it states that Zhang and Gaolan switched sides before Yuan Shao surrendered, most likely in the time leading up to, or shortly after, the supply depot at Wu Chao had been set alight. Guo Tu, who had been proven wrong, took his anger and embarrassment out by slandering Zhang He to Yuan Shao when he said, "Zhang He has been spouting impertinent words due to the rapid defeat of the army." In other words, he was claiming that Zhang He was joyful that Wu Chao had fallen and that he was proven right. Upon hearing of these claims, Zhang He became fearful for his life and that he would receive unjust punishment. He and Gaolan burned down their siege equipment and handed themselves over to Tao Hong. Tao Hong was reluctant to accept Zhang He's surrender, but Shun Yu said, "Zhang He's plan was rejected. He is angry and he has come away. How can you have any doubts?" With this, Zhang He's surrender was accepted. Cao Cao was pleased upon receiving Zhang He. He cited a story of a talented general who met his downfall due to his loyalty to his lord, and he remarked that he was grateful that Zhang He had not done the same thing. Taking into consideration Tao Hong's reluctance to accept Zhang He's surrender, it seems more likely that this event happened before Yuan Shao had completely given up. The rewards that Zhang He received could further support this, as Tao would be less grateful towards him if he had handed himself over after he had been defeated anyway. Cao Cao promoted him to be Lieutenant General and granted a village marco state to him. He was deployed against Yuan Shao's heirs at the battles of Yi, Bohai, and Liu Cheng. He was promoted again to the general who pacifies the Di for his merits in these battles. Within these various battles, Zhang He was given command of a separate unit to attack Yongnu alongside Yue Jin. On one occasion, Zhang He and Zhang Liao led the vanguard together as they seized Liu Cheng. In the year 206, a pirate force led by Guan Cheng was causing trouble in Donglai Commandery. Zhang He was ordered to, and successfully put an end to them. After the Wei defeat at Chibi, some rebels rose up in Lu County. Zhang Liao was sent to put them down, and was given Zhang He and Niu Gai to serve as his deputies. Zhang He successfully helped eliminate this problem as well. In 211, he was deployed in the Battle of Tong Pass. When the rebel coalition was defeated and broke up, Zhang He was given command of a separate force to attack Yangqi at Anling Commandery. He successfully drove his forces from the area, resulting in his surrender. A year later, he accompanied Xiao Yuan on his campaign to quell the Di tribes in Wudu Commandery. They defeated Liang Xing and relieved him of his city and his head, subduing any thoughts of an immediate uprising. They went on to attack Songjian too, and finally brought his commandery back into the fold. Xiao Yuan and Zhang He massacred Songjian and his people, to make up for the lack of repercussions they had received in the 30-odd years that they had been self-governing. In 214, Ma Chao had attempted to muster a force at the city of Ji, but the locals chased him from the area. He ventured further south and received support from Zhang Lu, who was wary of Cao Cao's advances into the region. Xiao Yuan responded to the locals' call for help, and assigned Zhang He with 5,000 infantry and cavalry to act as the vanguard. Ma Chao led 1,000 tribesmen to block their advance, but when they saw the size of the Wei army, they broke rank and fled. Zhang He then proceeded to claim all the military equipment that they had left behind. Cao Cao's annexation of Hanzhong soon got underway, and he began his journey to oversee the task. Over 10,000 tribesmen had united under the king of Di Dumao, and remained aggressive towards the Wei troops. Knowing that the Wei armies were marching south, the tribesmen obstructed the roads whilst keeping out of sight, using the terrain to their advantage. Zhang He and Zhu Ling were ordered to lead 5,000 men to clear the obstructed roads that led south, which enabled Cao Cao's safe passage. To prevent them from becoming a nuisance, Tao spent some time clearing the Di tribes from hiding, which led to a massacre for their people. At this point, generals from Xiping and Jicheng had killed Han Sui and sent his head to Cao Cao. The Wei army's morale was low, and they started complaining as the mountain paths were long and arduous. Cao Cao encouraged them by announcing he would remember their contributions and reward them greatly. In this time, Zhang Lu had ordered Jiang Wei and Yang Ang to defend the pass leading into Hanzhong. They had built defensive structures that spanned 3 miles long into the mountainous areas, which successfully repelled numerous assaults from Cao Cao. Shi Biao and Gao Zuo were sent on a night mission where they achieved success by killing Yang Ang, which led to Jiang Wei fleeing in the cover of night. When Tao personally got to Hanzhong, he received the surrender of the people, whereafter he renamed the city from Hanning to Hanzhong. He reorganized various counties and commanderies before receiving the submission of 2 tribal kings from Ba Yi. Tao then proceeded to split Ba Commandery into Ba Dong and Ba Shi, also known as East and West Ba, before appointing the 2 kings as the new administrators. With Hanzhong and the surrounding commanderies now under the jurisdiction of Emperor Xian, many officials and nobles were rewarded in this time. Around a year after Cao Cao had arrived to the area, Zhang Lu came out of hiding from Bajong and surrendered to him. Zhang Lu and his 5 sons were granted marquestates, and they all left their old positions. As Liu Bei had recently seized Yi province from Liu Zhang, once Zhang Lu had left the area, Liu Bei's forces began to occupy it in his absence. Up until this point, Liu Bei had been preoccupied in a dispute over Jing province with Wu. They managed to come to a diplomatic resolution though, as Liu Bei needed to focus on capturing Hanzhong. He dispatched his armies against the worn-out Wei soldiers in numerous conflicts, one of them being the Battle of Ba Shi. Zhang He was tasked with relocating the people of eastern and western Ba to Hanzhong. When he arrived, he was met by a force led by Zhang Fei, the Grand Administrator of Ba. The 2 armies became locked in a stalemate for almost 2 months, until Zhang Fei gambled by leading his crack troops through the mountains to carry out a pincer attack. Zhang He's army was caught off guard, and soon became unable to communicate up the chain of command and collapsed. It's recorded that Zhang He lost his horse in battle and had to flee on foot with a dozen or so men. Upon his return, he was appointed as the general who terrifies criminals. Cao Cao left the area before October in the year 218. He left Zia Haoyuan in charge of Hanzhong's defences, where he supervised Zhang He, Xu Huang and the others. The Battle of Mount Dingjun soon got underway, after Liu Bei crossed the Mian River and camped atop the mountain. Zia Haoyuan and Zhang He surrounded it, with Zia Haoyuan guarding the southern face and Zhang He guarding the eastern face. In the night, Liu Bei led his 10,000 elite troops to engage only Zhang He's position, while setting fire to his defensive structures. This caused Zia Haoyuan to divide his troops and lead half of them to assist the eastern front, where they started to put the fires out. At this point, Wang Zhong charged down the mountain and routed Zia Haoyuan's army, killing him in the process. Zhang He gathered what men he could and fled the area, but the Wei forces were in disarray and fearful that Liu Bei would finish them all off. Liu Bei became worried that Zhang He would assume command of the armies, and expressed disappointment when he learned it was Zia Haoyuan that was killed, not Zhang He. Guo Huai, who was serving as a major under Zia Haoyuan, nominated Zhang when he said, "General Zhang is a celebrated leader of our state." Liu Bei is afraid of him. As the situation becomes more critical every day, our minds will not be easy unless General Zhang takes command. It was from this point decided among the soldiers that Zhang He should take command of the armies. He quickly organized the troops into strategic locations, which deterred Liu Bei from advancing or pursuing them any further. When Cao Cao heard of this, he dispatched an envoy to present Zhang He with a staff of authority as a sign of his approval. It wasn't long until Cao Cao led his army to personally meet with Liu Bei, but they both stationed either side of the Han River and no battle was fought. When Tao left again, Zhang He was stationed at Chenkang to guard the passes from the south. 2 years later, when Tao Pi succeeded his father's kingdom, Zhang He was promoted to the general of the left and had his marquistate increased. Tao Pi went on to usurp the throne later that year, and after his coronation, he promoted Zhang He again, and gave him a marquis title, Marquis of Mao. A year later, he deployed with Tao Zhen to attack the eastern Xiang tribes in Anding Commandery. After this, they were summoned back to the capital for an audience with Tao Pi to discuss a pending 3-pronged attack against Wu. Zhang He was dispatched and involved in the siege of Jiangling. He was part of a 30,000 strong force led by Tao Zhen, who were sent along with Xie Haoshang and Xu Huang to attack Nan Commandery in Jing province. They soon surrounded Zhu Ran in Jiangling and had him trapped there for 4 months, until 10,000 Wu reinforcements led by Sun Sheng arrived to assist him. Sheng camped on a river island and provided support to the city as he built defensive structures that could provide cover. Zhang He led his detachment against him and drove him from the island before taking command of his camp. Things looked bad for Wu as illness soon broke out in their city. Zhu Geijin soon arrived though and adopted a similar strategy to Sun Sheng. Camped on an island but facing Xie Hao's army instead. In the night, Xie Haoshang easily captured the island where he thought it was best to build pontoon bridges to the riverbanks to enable easy transport of supplies and troops. This dangerous plan was memorialized to the throne by Dong Zhao, who argued that it made retreat very precarious. Luckily, Tao Pi heeded this advice and called for the plan to be aborted, but not before Pan Zhang had noticed, and led his men to attack the bridges along the riverside. Eventually the Wei forces got sick too, possibly caught from the people within the city, and carried out a retreat. Tao Rui then succeeded his father Tao Pi in the year 226 as the new emperor. He sent Zhang He to Jing province to defend against Wu. At one point, he and Sima Yi led troops to attack and defeated a Wu army led by Liu Yi, who fled before being defeated. Zhuge Liang launched his first northern campaign from Hanzhong 2 years later. In response, Tao Rui moved to Chang'an and relocated Zhang He to the area. Zhuge Liang's call to arms on his first campaign made 3 commanderies in Liang province defect over to Shu. He attacked Mount Shi with Ma Su leading the vanguard, who chose to camp atop Jieting. Zhang He's most noteworthy feat is here, where he noticed that Ma Su had completely ignored the surrounding cities as he stationed atop the hill. Zhang He cut the water supply to the Shu Han army, and they soon disintegrated. Wang Ping, who had refused to station with the rest of the Shu army, was able to rescue many men and organize a retreat, where it is said that he beat the drums himself. This act of bravery prevented Zhang He from risking pursuing them in case there lies an ambush. Zhang He instead marched his army to put down and reclaim the 3 revolting commanderies, whereafter he was greatly rewarded for his actions. An imperial decree arrived that said, "The rebel Zhuge Liang brought forth the rabble of Ba Shu and roared like a tiger. But while the masses panicked, General Zhang remained resolute and held his fighting spirit. He overcame the enemy and settled the public. I commend his actions and declare his fief increased by 1,000 households to a total of 4,300. Sima Yi was currently in Jing province, raising a fleet with the intention to invade Wu. Zhang He was ordered to oversee the navy that was leaving from the Guangdong region. When they eventually arrived in Jing, the winter weather had left the water too shallow for the boats to advance, and so the mission was aborted. Zhuge's second northern campaign had him lay siege to Chengkang Castle with his 40,000 men against Hao Zhao's 1,000. Tao Rui summoned Zhang He to the capital to discuss counterplans against the Shu invasion. They ended up meeting in Henan instead, where Zhang He was given command of 30,000 troops and some imperial guards to be his personal bodyguards. Tao Rui was worrying and said to Zhang He, "General, if you're late, will Zhuge Liang have already captured Chengkang?" Zhang He made a correct prediction when he replied, "Zhuge Liang will have already left before I reach Chengkang. I estimate that he has less than 10 days' worth of supplies." Zhang He then led his troops day and night towards Nanjing County until news of the Shu forces' retreat came in. Tao Rui then summoned him back to the capital and commissioned him as the general of chariots and cavalry who attacks the west. It was at the time of Zhuge Liang's 4th northern campaign that Zhang He fell in battle. Sima Yi and himself were dispatched to repel the latest Shu invasion. Zhuge had positioned his army atop Mount Shi and took a defensive stance. Sima Yi ordered Zhang He into pursuit, but he argued against it by saying, "According to classical military doctrine, one should not pursue an enemy returning to his home base." As Sima Yi outranked him and insisted upon it, Zhang He had no choice. He fell into an ambush at Mu Men Trail after a stray arrow hit him in the thigh. His posthumous title, granted by Tao Rui, Marquis Zhuang, literally means robust marquis. Zhang He's resourcefulness regarding military knowledge, leadership, geography, and his foresight rightfully led to him being highly regarded even by his enemies. Confucian scholars came to respect him as he showed honest concern for the internal preservation of Wei. An imperial decree was issued to Zhang He which praised his upheld duty to internal and external matters. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.